What is a last?
Essentially a model of a foot with allowances that allow the shoe to fit the foot.
What are some of the key changes that have happened in terms of expectation from consumers that's driving development and design?
Comfort is the driving change, and especially underfoot comfort materials like.
You're dealing with Euro and US sizing. Do you find much complexity in that?
We've built our own charts, translate the sizing. As long as you start off with the right size that you want to try on as our sample size, then we can build off that. The only problem might be is.
Welcome to the Comfort Walk and Talk, where every step towards comfort is a step towards a healthier you.
We're your hosts, Ash,
Jeff,
And Ben.
together let's walk the talk, transforming your lives from the ground up. Welcome to another episode of Comfort Walk and Talk. We thought it was a great opportunity today to actually introduce a special team member from our team, our designer, because I think a lot of people see a shoe, see some footwear, and they think it's pretty simple. And I think it'd be really nice to have our designer explain some of the detail that goes into making good footwear. George is our designer, and he's been with the company for about 3 years now. But George has around about 40 years in the footwear industry. And George started working for his dad in a footwear factory. And he's been involved in the footwear industry from many different aspects, making shoes, designing shoes, making patterns, working with the team, sales teams, etc. So he's got a huge amount of knowledge. And one of the things that George brings to the table today is explaining, the changes that he's seen in the industry. And 40 years ago, shoes were made in Australia. Most of the shoes now are not made in Australia. They're made in China and other countries. In fact, China makes around about 70% of the footwear. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce George to the podcast.
Hey guys, nice to be here, Jeff. Finally.
Finally,
Yeah.
you've been hankering for this.
Well, you've been telling me about it for a few months now. So.
We wanted to just keep you, up warm until we were ready to go with you. Because
Thank you.
I know we don't want to give you a bigger head than you've got now.
Thank you.
All right. But anyway, why do you love footwear design so much?
It's been a part of my life. I sort of fell into it, to be honest. Starting with my father, and my father sort of said, well, if you're not that great at school, why don't you go and do some shoe designing, So that's what started my career path in shoe design or development, because at the time there was no shoe designers in Australia. When I first started, it was like you're a developer. That's what you did, because all the designs came from overseas.
Interesting. So when you say design, is that like the look and feel you mean?
From initial concept, the thought of a brand new shoe, or completely, out of this world design, that no one has ever seen before.
So let's drill into, before you sort of get into the specifics of footwear design and all that, obviously Australia making shoes, and then you've seen the transition in terms of, Australia becoming, importing a lot of shoes. What has been the changes you've seen in the industry in terms of footwear manufacturing and design?
The processes have probably automated a lot more since, when we were first making shoes in Australia, but the initial the initial patterns and design process, and even some of the manufacturing hasn't changed greatly, right? The automation has, but the processes haven't. If that sort of makes sense.
So you were telling me a wee while ago that when you first went to China, you actually were educating them how to make shoes.
Well, they didn't know how to make shoes, so it was all international technicians and expertise that used to go there and say, this is how I want it done, this is how I want the uppers to be cut, this is how I want them to be stitched, this is how I want them to made. And a lot of times we'd do packages that we'd send leathers, the knives that cut the materials and all the patterns and then they just put the shoe together and did the final process.
Yeah. So with a shoe, all right, if we start with a shoe, and then we can drill down to what makes some of the special features that customers should look out for. let's take a it's a pretty common looking shoe. I mean, we think it's very attractive, but the issues on that shoe in terms of shoes are, tell us a little bit about some of the components in that shoe and the complexities around it.
I suppose that one of the main comfort features should be the footbed. It should have a comfort underfoot, something that's got a bit of spring and release. The next one is the outsole, to have a little bit of comfort in there, flexibility, and the materials, to have some sort of softness in the upper, and sometimes the way the uppers are constructed, that there's no obtrusions inside the shoes, that you get bumps in your feet, and after time you've got things digging inside your feet.
So how do you go about designing a shoe from ground up?
Because of my pattern background, I can sort of, when I start thinking about it, I say, oh, there's too many panels here and there's too many layers, and how do we eliminate it, so it's comfortable in wear. So that's the challenges that, when you look at a shoe and you go, how do we do it? So we work together with factories, and I mean, this one here was a particular issue with a lining inside, had bumps and lumps. And, my last trip to China, we sorted it out, with the factory owner. It was a challenge, but you sort of look at it and you go, it's how complicated is it? But it is.
So do you use AI and artificial intelligence or to create sketches and designs?
I know that there's AI out there that probably generates some stuff. I don't actually use it. I design by hand. I like my freehand sketches, and that's, I don't see myself changing.
Take a long time doing sketches of shoes.
Not really. I actually, I can pull a few drawings, maybe 10, 20 drawings a day, depending on how complicated they are and whether I'm designing from the whole shoe, from outsole to upper, or whether I'm just adjusting the upper for, 6 holes to 10 holes, or, laces to a strap. That's a little bit easier.
So George, can we talk about the specific features that go into a shoe like that? Because before I started working here, I honestly thought the difference between shoes when it comes to comfort and adjustability was regular and wide. And that's all I knew. So talk a little bit about what goes into a shoe like that Mia Vita sneaker and why we would consider that a comfort shoe.
When we develop shoes from scratch, we consider like tread widths, because there's a certain fit that we try to capture, a certain foot. Now, over the years, I've worked out that, a C+ would be our general population. So we sort of got a template that we work on, and that's where it starts from. So the shape of the foot, and then all the other components that we talked about, the footbed, and it could be arch support if we're going to correct the arch, comfort, underfoot comfort, softness. Like there's different degrees of softness you can put in the shoe. I find personally, if it's too soft, I get aches and pains at the end of the day. My feet are killing me. If it's too hard, the same thing. So there's a balance between the right support and comfort under your foot.
Sounds like there's also a balance between the mechanics of the shoe and then the design as well in terms of fashion.
Well, the design, you've got padded tops, where I like to incorporate as much as I can padded tops, because they hug your foot and they're soft around your ankle. And then adjustability. I mean, this one we've got a zip that's easy on and off for people that don't want to do the laces up. But I mean, there's other styles that we do. We put Velcro adjustable straps where possible, and I incorporate buckle embellishments like as a trim. So the strap looks like it's got a buckle on it, which it does, but it's actually a Velcro strap.
Yeah, super adjustable.
Super adjustable, and easy to get on, yeah.
So George, can you tell us a little bit about potentially some other brands that, whilst these Vita soles are awesome and they're super comfortable, that's the best of both worlds. So could you tell us a little bit about if you know of other brands that have potentially compromised comfort in order to look cool?
There was a time, or like I'd say more than once, but I've met some Italian designers that they're like way, way over the top on their designs, and they cannot detract from the first model that they've made. So if they've developed this model, they say, this is beautiful, this is sexy, this is, the next best thing since sliced bread. And the thing is, you look at it and you go, that's never going to fit. That's never going to fit anyone. It looks really narrow.
Yeah.
It looks good. It looks balanced.
But not on an actual human.
But yeah. And they'll make the factories make those shoes and don't detract from that. Whereas we're a little bit different. We want our shoes to fit and we want them to be comfortable. So we've got to incorporate the style with all that, the comfort features and the attributes that we're known for.
So George, you obviously, your job in the company is design and development and working with the factories in terms of the development. One of the other aspects that sometimes isn't in this role, but you are actively making sure the shoes fit. So explain to us a little bit, because I think that sometimes the presumption is that it's pretty easy to make a shoe fit. What's the process you go through to make the shoe, to work on the fit?
Well, we've got a template that we work from, like a recipe you could call it, where we know that, as I was saying earlier, we know the width the width of a bottom that for our particular customer. So we start from that.
That would be a wide width, wouldn't it? That'd be a C+ would be close to a wide fit.
You could call it a wide, yeah.
And you're saying that's a big portion of the population in Australia.
Yes. Yeah. Over the years, we've done. I've been involved in other comfort brands, and we've done. I've done thousands of fit trials, fit tests, and I still do it. When we're in the developing process, we've got models in China. We've got 2 or 3 models, sample size models in Australia. Then once we develop that sample and we're happy with that one size, we do another 2 or 3 sizes and check it on, like a size. If our sample's a 7 or an 8, then I'll do a 9 or a 10 and sometimes even an 11, depending on the size run. And I try to make sure that I get the best fit possible on all those sizes. So if 2 people say, no, I don't like it, it's hurting me here, inside the shoe, it's cutting me there, doesn't matter what the other 2 people, so it's 50%. That's not a great hit rate. It's got to be 80% or more before it goes into production, or 100%. That's what we look for.
And could you talk about a last? Like, what is a last? So what we have here?
Yes. So
talk about that. What is that?
It's essentially a model of a foot with allowances that allow the shoe to fit the foot. So when I say allowances, and it could be the look and the fit, like that's not the shape of a foot, right? So you allow for the toe extension, so there's enough room so your toe's not hitting when you're walking, and it can't be exactly the same as a foot because it needs an allowance so the foot can fit internally. Sure. And I mean, there's a technology behind that, because even the back's got to sort of clip the foot and hold. You can't have a shoe that's sort of slipping when you walk. So,
and that's probably the most important thing to start with, isn't it?
The most important.
Last right.
Get the last.
The most important, yeah.
Yeah. And is it the last? Once you get a last, the good thing about it is you have a last, it makes the production consistent, pretty close to being consistent.
Yes.
Because they're always building the upper around that last.
Yes. There is variations in materials, softer materials, stretch, and sometimes we work with some great factories, but I've seen guys that, when they put an upper or the shoe on the last for the first time, they stretch it too much in the machine process. So there's other technicalities that come into play, but we work with factories that are pretty consistent.
So that's a good point you made about variation. So materials are important in footwear, aren't they? So,
definitely
very important. So you've got soft leather, hard leather, soft fabrics. So how do you go about deciding what material to use?
Well, we always try to go for softer materials, and sometimes it's a challenge between, like, if you want a material that's more aniline, which is two-tone effect material, they tend to be harder. So you try to work with the tanneries and we go, look, I want that effect, but I want it soft, and they sort of, and you're fighting in there, in the factories, but we tend to get what we want in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're lucky. Like we've got good partners in China that, that help us achieve what we need to achieve.
So, George, what has changed, since you started? What are some of the biggest changes you've noticed in the manufacturing process?
So in the early days of manufacturing in China, we used to send packages from Australia with all the componentry, the leathers and the knives, the cutting knives and instructions to China. And they used to take the package and assemble it and make the shoes. And I used to travel there while they were doing the process and used to teach them how to do that. And then hopefully, by the end of it, we got a great result. There was some times where it wasn't so great in the early days. We had a lot of shoes that we cancelled. We couldn't sell.
What about the design? What's changed in the design? You talked about materials and using the softer leathers and things like that. Has that changed people's need for different styles and different fashions, coming into play over the years?
I think if you sort of look back, say 40 years ago, there wasn't as many brands out there. There wasn't people weren't as eccentric, if you like, and most people used to wear the same shoes. So if there was one great style in Australia, everyone was wearing that style, and that's what's changed. Like now, we've got so much access. Everyone's looking on the internet. Oh, I like that shoe. No one else has got it. I'm getting it.
I suppose brands like Converse and like the All Stars and exactly the same. And they've lasted through decades. The styles hasn't really changed.
Well, the Chuck Taylor, for example. I mean, that's been the same shoe hasn't changed for how many years?
They're not comfortable though, are they?
Look, they've got their comfort attributes too, but I wouldn't call them
a comfort shoe.
Yeah.
At one stage, a time there was a lot of people buying the same shoe or similar shoes. But now with the options of the internet, global markets and all that, they're just seeing various options. So there must have been a significant proliferation you've seen over the years in terms of the number of designs expected for you to design physically. I mean, how many do you design for us a season?
Well, I couldn't count, Jeff. How many sketches do I send you sort of on a daily basis when we're in the development process?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And we'd all love to have like the Model T principle, but that's a big change you've seen, isn't it?
Yeah. And like, all the brands are chasing the next best thing. So, and we're doing the same, we're trying to create something that's a little bit unique without being too off the beaten track.
So what is the next best thing? What do you think are some of the predictions?
All
for
of
the
my
future?
designs.
All your designs,
All of my designs.
Yeah.
What are some of the key changes that have happened in terms of expectation from consumers that's driving development and design? In your mind?
Well, I suppose comfort is the probably the driving change. There's and especially underfoot comfort, I suppose, and we've got materials like memory foams and soft PU like that we can rebound PU. The technologies in material now. You've got pour on, that.
So that's something that we're putting in every shoe.
Pretty much, yeah.
And has that been a big change? Was like 20 years ago, was there a lot more sort of less cushioned?
20 years ago, we used to just put little foam, like a little foam piece, like a latex foam that collapsed after, one day. It had a little bit of sponginess, but not really. You wouldn't call it a comfort shoe.
Yeah. And what are some of the features that are built into, you'd expect to see in our footwear that we can define as comfort?
Obviously a good arch support, like a footbed that's comfortable and anatomically designed with an arch support that cradles your foot.
Does that affect the last?
Sure, you got to build that into the last. So sometimes the challenge is making it look elegant with all the the allowances for that internal footbed.
Yeah.
I think the cool part about the Comfort Co is that we balance both of those areas very well. You know, when we talk about the changes of the years and if memory cushioning and things like that are such a huge feature for what people are expecting in shoes in 2024, being able to balance that with a good looking shoe seems to be, you know, with brands like Mia Vita, with, you know, Vionic, those ones where a women's fashion, you know, I think these days people are expecting it. And so if you don't have a good looking shoe or you don't have that cushioning or the comfort features built in, it's not a good shoe. So the fact that Comfort Co brands are doing both of those things, I think is a huge bonus, would you say?
Oh, definitely.
Where do you source inspiration for designs? Because that's important, isn't it, to be bringing stuff to the table?
I suppose, you know, we've got access to the whole world, and it's quite easy, you know, and there's a number of brands that sort of I go to. I won't name those brands, but I take inspiration with all the trends that are occurring, and you can just get on the internet, you can see what's happening. You know, local shopping centres, you sort of even check what people are wearing on their feet. I'm always looking down at people.
Literally.
Part of the pun. Yeah, and sort of just collate that idea, and when the time comes for the next season, you know, I've got all that in my head and start sort of sketching, trying to be a little bit unique in my ideas.
Do you see more inspiration coming from like Europe or from North America or?
From Europe,
Asia?
definitely. Or, you know, yeah, Europe.
Does that tend to be where?
Pretty much, because they're a season ahead.
Yeah.
So they're the trendsetters in the world. We're obviously followers, but we obviously got to cater for our market because not all the trends are going to trickle down exactly as overseas, and you can't copy anyone because all the brands are available here. So you need to be unique in the design method.
Are the widths, are the fits different? The fit, like different parts of the world, the fit's different?
Yes. In America, I think in general they got like probably one fitting narrower.
Narrower, okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
In Europe, I think they're roughly the same as Australia.
Yeah. And do you, and the complexity of dealing with Euro and US sizing, do you find much complexity in that?
We've built our own charts that sort of translate the sizing. I think in a simple way. You know, it's on our website, I believe. As long as you start off with the right size that you want to try on as our sample size, then we can build off that. It doesn't matter whether it's US or whether it's Euro. The only problem might be is if you're offering full and half sizes, in example, US grading, you go from a 7 to 7.5 to an 8, whereas in Euro, you're jumping from a 37, 38, 39. The jump is a little bit more per half size. So Euro's 3/4 of a size, for example, versus a half a size.
And talk about a bit about your forward planning, because I imagine as a footwear designer, you're constantly thinking 6 months ahead, a year ahead, because when it comes to the manufacturing process, that takes time. So thinking, okay, in 6 months' time, we need to have made X amount of shoes for this brand. In summer or in winter, it's very seasonal. And then beyond that, you're also thinking, will this shoe be relevant in a year's time? So talk a little bit about your mindset when it comes to what is a good design of a shoe.
Yeah, well, we are always working 1 year ahead. So that's the challenge. That's a good question. You know, I suppose we think about it. We don't think about how it's going to reflect in a year's time. We're thinking about it at the moment and what's happening around the world at the moment, and how are we going to translate that for the next season, and that's the challenge of the design.
So, you know, like Europe could be a little bit ahead of us, but as the world gets a little bit of a smaller place because of the internet, then if we're designing around now, it may not be relevant in a year's time. That's sort of what you're saying.
It's possible.
You have to tweak it.
Yeah,
you have to
it's
tweak
possible.
it and anticipate a trend.
Yes.
For brands like Shoal, we have, the European collection is very clog based, and that's not going to translate on the Gold Coast in Australia. That's a good example of, we carry the Shoal footwear range, but it's, they're, even though it's the same brand, we've got, a huge difference in our collection.
Yeah. I think that clog is probably, you wouldn't call it what we've just talked about, the attributes here is not something that we've,
So, George, just back in time, what's one of your most proud designs or experiences you've had? Just a story about a shoe that you've created that's been an absolute winner.
An absolute winner. It'd be for another brand, Jeff.
Yeah, well, don't name the brand, but tell us about the shoe.
I don't know whether I can pinpoint one great shoe, but I've done some men's shoes and women's shoes that have sold like in a different time in a different market, and they've sold like tens of thousands of pairs for one style, which in these days it's sort of unheard of, like in one season, that is. But I think probably the best time would be I was working with a lady boss of mine, and when I started together with her, the business was a $12 million business, and we grew it to a $33 million business in 9 years, something like that. So the growth was unbelievable.
Tell us, why is it so important to create a design that the consumer will like?
Don't we all love wearing nice, pretty shoes, in our minds? But like what you think is pretty is, I might not think it's so pretty. So the challenge is to design something that we can sell to the masses.
The biggest percentage.
The biggest percentage are going to find it attractive. And that's something that you sort of develop over the years, because the customers and that age group, the demographic, and hopefully with sketching some some designs, you can get some ideas, and we finally make them and they sell. That's why it's so important that we design shoes that the customer loves.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, how we're all walking around with shoes, and we're in shoes. We're either in the office, we're at the shops, we're walking around, we're doing errands. Everyone has a pair of shoes on that they take with them through the day. So obviously, being able to create a shoe that people like the look of and then also feel comfortable in, that's a major plus.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Would you say fit's probably one of the biggest determinants? And if someone feels good in a shoe,
if the shoe doesn't fit, there's no chance you're going to sell it unless it was something that someone really loved and wanted, and they'll squeeze their foot in it.
No.
I can tell you stories of a friend of mine bought some shoes like last year from Myers, and she bought 2 pairs. Retail price, I think $1,200, and she got them for like $500 on special. They were one size too small. George, please, can you stretch them for me? George, can you please stretch them for me?
Yeah.
Why would you buy them?
Yeah. It was half price.
They were on special.
That's to say, it always in our business, they always say that, like, even if the shoe's not the best looking shoe, you can always sell a shoe that fits. A typical shoe, right? How many hours do you think it takes to take it from create a concept, to actually making a shoe for the customer?
There's hundreds of hours involved. I'll, for example, if you look at any shoe, there's an outsole. The outsole in this particular one is 2-part outsole. So you've got to design the mold from scratch. So there's firstly the design process, where you sketch a number of ideas and, before you actually put it into a physical item. And that could take weeks, because you're sort of back and forth with the factory's engineering drawings, like, thicknesses of outsoles. Like, there's so many things that the variables that go into it. Once you've got that mold, then you start sketching ideas of the tops. You might draw 10, 20 different ideas. You might get the factory to develop 5, 10 of those ideas before you actually say, okay, that looks great. that's nice, that fits nice, and like there's hundreds of hours involved, and the process could take months before you actually see a shoe, like a final shoe.
So everybody, at home that are looking at their shoes that they currently have on or that are in their wardrobe, they would just see them as a pair of shoes, but the time that takes to,
It's engineering. You're actually engineering something. It's not just something that comes together. Like every part has like its time and thought process put into it to get that final product. Another point to note that we actually build our shoes from scratch. So what we were talking about, the engineering part of it, we build it from the last, as we mentioned earlier, to the outsole, to the upper, and the design. We develop the whole lot. As opposed to other companies where they'll find something in the market, like they'll travel into China and go to the Guangzhou markets and find an outsole, find a shoe. They go, oh yeah, make us those samples. That's it, and done. And don't even worry about the fit process. Don't even worry about if it's soft or comfortable or what's the footbeds or what materials have they used. And that's the difference between us and them.
So what's the most overlooked thing in terms of creating a really comfortable shoe?
So I think one of the most things that's overlooked is probably underfoot comfort and support, because we love our shoes to be comfortable. Less painful feet, back pains and foot pains, being able to wear the shoes all day.
All right, well, thanks, George. Another good episode of Comfort Walk and Talk. We really wanted to introduce some of our design processes to our customers. There's a lot that goes into making a shoe, and we do hundreds of them every season. And so we just wanted to introduce that. Anyone who's got any questions, any suggestions on what they'd like to see from us, by all means, please communicate with us and it will go directly to George. Some things might be possible and some things may not be. But please send us the ideas. We're totally open. That's one of the nice things about being a local company, is that we can really take the feedback from our customers. So anyway, thanks, George. Thanks, everyone, for another great episode.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for listening to the Comfort Walk and Talk. If this episode has stepped up your foot care game, we'd love your support with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And don't forget to subscribe on your favourite platform so you never miss a step on your journey to comfort.
And for more insights, follow us at our social channels at the Comfort Walk and Talk. Walk comfortably until we meet again.